There were not a lot of African Americans in the state of Washington at that time. So this was really kind of our civil rights issue of the day in the state of Washington, the rights of our Native American people to enforce the provisions of the Medicine Creek Treaty and the other treaties that Governor Stevens made with the Indian tribes. So it was a really, this was a time when civil rights issues were capturing the headlines all over the country, and this was our civil rights issue here in the Northwest.
In 1974, the Boldt Decision granted equal rights to Native Americans to fish salmon in the Northwest. This came after decades of regulations prohibiting access to fish their native lands.
Well, we got Squaxin over here behind us. We've got the Puyallup tribe to the north of us, Nisqually tribe in the middle, and that's made up of Medicine Creek Treaty. So that was the first treaty that was signed, Medicine Creek.
Well, Congress created the Washington Territory in 1853, and the first territorial governor was a man by the name of Isaac Ingalls Stevens, and he came out here, and one of his charges was to negotiate treaties with the Indian tribes in the area to endeavor to get them to cede a title to the lands that they occupied to the United States in return for certain consideration. And the one that's most pertinent to the area that we're in right now was the so-called Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. Well, it had a number of provisions, but the one that was most pertinent to the famous case of U.S. v. Washington, it says this: the right of taking fish at all usual and accustomed grounds and stations is further secured to said Indians in common with all citizens of the territory. But the United States received a cession from all the tribes of thousands and thousands of acres of land, and in return afforded the Indians certain rights to fish and gather shellfish and some other considerations.
Our salmon was part of who we are, you know, and we have first fish ceremonies. We have, you know, all of our medicines are fish and cedar, and all of our medicines all over. This is all before the white man ever come.
I think the Department of Fisheries of the state of Washington did view the Indians' efforts to take large amounts of salmon as a threat to the stocks. They concluded that an Indian fisher had no greater right to fish than any non-native fisher, and so they would enforce the regulations for fishing out of season and catch limits and all of that sort of thing. The Indians, on the other hand, were taking the position: look, we have this treaty that says we have collectively an equal right to the fish.
And they told us at Nisqually, they said, you stay up on the reservation. You can fish on the reservation, but you can't fish off the reservation. And so, well, in 1914, my dad, so he come down to the mouth of the river. He's not gonna, they bought him out now. So he walked down to the mouth of the river, and he bought 6 acres from Wint Bennett. So that's made up of Frank's Landing right now. And so then I fished there. I was 14 when I started getting arrested. And from then they just kept arresting me because I don't fish on the reservation, I'm fishing off the reservation.
But they seemed to come to a head in the 1960s, I think because the salmon stocks were jeopardized, or there were more non-native people by far in the state of Washington than there were natives, so that was one factor. Also, industrialization and the building of dams had reduced the salmon stocks, so there was more competition for less fish, and I think that's one of the reasons this all came to a head. Well, they engaged in fish-ins, which would, and there would be, arrests would be made, and there would be a certain amount of martyrdom as a result of that. They would just go out and fish and out of season or in an area that they weren't supposed to fish in, and the fisheries officers would sometimes make an arrest of them, and they could be charged, and jail sentences could be imposed.
In 1968, we fished in Olympia at the Capitol Lake, and we got thrown in jail there. Hank Adams was one of our leaders, and he was on a bullhorn. And so I'm down there, and they packed me up from down in the water and throwed me in this car, the police car. Pretty soon Hank Adams comes in. I said, "What the hell are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, they throwed me in jail for being on the bullhorn." I said, "Okay, well, we're all going to jail." So another guy, a white kid, come along, and all he asked is, "What are you guys doing to the Indians now?" And they threw him in. So all three of us went up to the county jail, which they filled up later, but that was a fish-in down there in Capitol Lake. And it was kind of a knockdown, drag-out fishing, you know.
They would often try to have celebrities come in and fish in with them. Marlon Brando, the famous actor, for instance, engaged in a fish-in on behalf of the Indians. They did not make an arrest of him. I think that perhaps the state was reluctant to make Marlon Brando a martyr. Dick Gregory, the African-American comedian, humorist, was arrested and actually sentenced to a fairly lengthy jail sentence in the Thurston County Jail. He fished in with the Indians.
The biggest thing that ever happened in our time was we had an encampment on the Puyallup River. There must have been 300 or 400 of us and our kids and everybody. We had a fire, and we had an encampment. Everybody was living there, and we were fishing on the Puyallup River. They gassed us that day. They gassed all of us. They gassed the U.S. Attorney, Stan Pitkin. And we've been begging Stan Pitkin and all of the U.S. attorneys to take our case. The state of Washington is beating us up every night, every day. They're, and over treaty rights. And you guys, you haven't done a thing. Well, when they got gassed, he took the case, and that's what happened in U.S. versus Washington.
And that case went to trial before Judge George Boldt in Tacoma. He was the United States District Court Judge for the Western District of Washington at Tacoma. The United States took the position that the United States intended that there be an equal sharing of fish resources between the tribes and the settlers. And that's what the case focused on. And Judge Boldt agreed with the United States government and concluded that the Native Americans in the area had a right collectively to equal share of the salmon with the citizens of the state. The decision was appealed, as you might imagine. It first went to the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit in San Francisco. They affirmed Judge Boldt's decision. Then went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they largely affirmed his decision there in 1979.
And that was a big one for us. It was big for managing the resource. And, that was everything that we believed in, is to manage the resource. And so it was just a happy day for us,
Judge Boldt was quite a man. It took a lot of courage for him to issue the opinion that he did, which was initially not very popular in the state of Washington. I think that having the highest court in the land put its imprimatur on the decision that he had made, showed that this wasn't an aberration, this decision that was based in properly on the facts that were before the judge and the law of the land. And then I think over the years, as the tribes and the government of the state and the federal government have worked together to try to improve the conditions in this state for the fish and shellfish, that people have become reconciled with the decision.
So that, you know, it's going to take us all. And that's how the tribes have always talked about, we got to be together. We got to be together too, in the natural world that we live in, or otherwise it's going to be gone. Love,